Okay, so let's talk now about the value of attending law school, business school, graduate school. So let me just see a show of hands. How many people are thinking at some point, I want to do some type of graduate school, probably, maybe? Okay, so I'm going to guess that's about 70%. All right, so let's go through and look at these. So first, let's talk about law school. What is the value of attending law school? Okay? So one of them is it opens up a whole new set of career options, right? There are many career options that you can only access by having gone to law school, right? If you want to be a district attorney, if you want to be an M&A attorney in a corporate firm, if you want to practice family law, okay? Any type of legal practice, you must have gone to law school and passed the bar of the state where you're doing it, or else you can be banned from ever practicing law anywhere in the country, okay? There's a really strict rule about that. You can never engage in the unauthorized practice of law. So as a law student, you have to be very careful about not giving legal advice. And so you're very protected. And that leads to the second point of financial stability. Regardless of what people say about sort of the law market right now, the reason that people have freaked out about the state of the law market is not because lawyers are experiencing any more financial turmoil than any other profession. They're certainly better off than investment bankers or mortgage brokers, okay? They're better off than a lot of folks. But in most recessions, lawyers were completely immune, completely immune. The joke used to be when times were good, you did mergers and acquisitions, and when times were bad, you did bankruptcy, okay? This time, in this recession, lawyers did see some reduction in salary during the worst of the recession, and there was an uptick in unemployment amongst lawyers during the worst of the recession, but that is pretty much already gone. So to give you a sense, okay, the largest law firms, they are partnerships, right? So what happens is they pay all the employees, and then the rest of the money is divvied up amongst the partners. So they're not going to pay for anything more than they have to, right? Because if I have an extra associate, or I pay that associate more than I need to, that's money straight out of my pocket, right, in a partnership. So law firms have now increased the starting salary back to the pre-depression, or whatever you want to call this recession, extended recession, the pre-recession levels. So for example, in New York City, starting salary is back up to 160. In Boston, it's back up to 125. In Atlanta, it's over 100,000, right? So, you know, if you are going to these top firms, okay, regardless of where, you're at pre-recession level income. If there was such a horrible crisis, okay, in the legal field, that wouldn't be happening because people don't pay more money for something than they need to, okay? These people are not doing this out of charity, okay? So sure, there was some, you know, a bit of financial turmoil in law, just as there was in every other profession. But at the end of the day, and I wrote about this in Forbes, and I took a lot of heat for it, but now it's turning out to be right. If you look at the long term, if you go to law school, you have double the average lifetime earnings, $4 million, versus if you just go to undergrad, okay? So if you want to go to law school, I don't think law school is the right solution for everybody. But if you want to go to law school, you should not be deterred because they write in the New York Times about some guy who's waiting tables in Times Square who went to law school. Okay? When we've dug deep, when journalists have really looked into some of those cases, a lot of those people just made really bad financial choices all throughout their life and have put themselves in very precarious positions, and it really has nothing to do with the fact that they were a lawyer. The one that was the most featured, he actually used his student loan money to buy a house in Southern California, and then the housing market imploded, and that's why he was in such disrepair financially. It actually had nothing to do with the fact that he had gone to law school. Even if you go to law school and you end up not practicing, like I don't practice actively other than pro bono cases, there's a huge benefit to going to law school in terms of thinking like a lawyer. And one of the best things about thinking like a lawyer is that a lot of boards of directors, boards of startup companies, want to have you on their boards. So I sit on the board of 2 or 3 different startups, and the nice thing about that is you get shares in the startup for advising them, and this is like an hour a month. Right? Just being on a conference call an hour a month. But when you're a lawyer, you have fiduciary duties, meaning if you see something going wrong, you have to report it, okay? So they always want a lawyer on their board of directors, okay? So I've been put on boards of directors a bunch of times, not because maybe I was the person they most would have chosen, but because investors will not invest in a company without at least one lawyer on the board because they want to be sure somebody is watching the piggy bank, okay? And so that's another big advantage of going to law school, is you learn to think like a lawyer, and that can be really helpful in terms of shaping problems, understanding problems, dealing with issues, okay? Now, law school can also be a great social experience. It's not known for that, okay? The first year is tough, I'm not gonna lie to you, but after the first year, everybody pretty much calms down, okay? So the first year is tough, it is very challenging because you are graded on a forced curve. So in a group of 90 people, there must be 5 A's, 20 A minuses, 25 B pluses, 35 B's, and it doesn't matter how well everybody does, they just line you up like cattle and the grades fall where they may, okay? So that's a little bit, uncomfortable. But after that, things are totally fine, and some of my best friends are people that I went to law school with. And finally, going to law school gives you this great sense of confidence, okay? That you can defend yourself and that you're not going to be worried about being put in a situation where you have to, do public speaking, or where you have to, you're not going to allow anybody to push you around. Not to say that you do now, but once you have a legal education, you sort of understand very clearly your rights in the system, and you're going to assert those rights if somebody tries to contravene them. Okay, so here's the traditional paths over here for criminal litigation, civil litigation, government, small practice. But then if you look over here, there's lots of non-traditional paths like nonprofit management. Almost everybody in real estate, like big real estate investors, not like real estate agent necessarily, but big real estate investors, almost all of them have law degrees, because anything to do with real estate or anything to do with mergers and acquisitions, a law degree is going to come very much in handy. Even journalists. Many journalists, or so-called journalists, have gone to law school. Perhaps the most famous or infamous is Jerry Springer. He actually went to Northwestern Law School, which is a top 15 law school, which is kind of amazing. All right, what about business school? Okay, if you're thinking about business school, you will probably want to take a few years off before you go to business school, okay? Most top 25 business programs will not admit you straight through from undergrad. In fact, it's almost a litmus test. If a school would admit you straight through from undergrad, they're probably not a good enough business school for you to be going to, okay? Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this, which are Harvard's 2+2 program, Stanford's deferred admissions program. What these are, and they tend to really value people who are leaders on campus, people like you, okay? These programs allow you to get admitted going into your senior year. You get admitted to Harvard Business School, or you get admitted to Stanford Business School, Graduate School of Business, and then you have to work for, at Harvard, it has to be 2 years. At Stanford, it's 1 to 3 years. You can decide how many years you want to work, but both of them require you to work for a certain period of time. But you have to apply. In Harvard, you apply the summer between junior and senior year, and for Stanford, you apply in senior year, but at the beginning, in October. Okay? Why do I mention this? A couple of reasons. Number one is they don't have any business experience to judge you on. So what do they judge you on? Well, both of these schools are really looking for leaders. Okay? You don't go to business school because of the job you're going to get the day after you graduate from business school. It probably won't be that much different from the job you had the day you went into business school. Maybe you'll make $20,000 or $30,000 more, but you won't have all that much more responsibility. It's not like they're going to make you the CEO just because you graduated from business school. Okay? The reason you get an MBA is so that 20 years from now you can be the CEO, or so that 20 years from now you can be sitting in the corner office. Okay? And so what business schools are looking for, especially the top business schools, is they are looking for leaders. So for these 2+2 programs and the deferred admissions programs, the people who tend to be successful are not necessarily the people with the highest grades. They typically have decent grades. But they are people who have demonstrated significant leadership experience. So if you're the president, if you're a chapter, okay? If you're deeply involved in campus, maybe you're also the president of the student government or something like that, okay? People who have very, very strong demonstrated leadership skills in undergrad tend to get into this program, okay? And there's really no downside to applying to the 2+2 or deferred admissions programs, because you apply while you're in school. If you don't get in, then probably 3 or 4 years later, you will apply to business school. And it's actually a good sign to them that you did apply before, even though you didn't get in. It wasn't like they didn't take you because they personally disliked you, right? They just couldn't fit you in the class at that time. And so at least it shows that you have had a sustained interest in the school. And then graduate school, and by graduate school I mean masters and PhDs in virtually everything else. Okay? So whether that's a master's or a PhD in psychology or biology or history or divinity, okay? So let's talk a little bit about those programs. They tend to be very deep, okay? It's the difference between what the analogy is the difference between a butterfly and a nail, okay? When you go to law school or you go to business school, it's like a butterfly. You have very superficial knowledge of a lot of different things, right? So in law school, they make you take civil procedure and criminal law and property law and torts law. And yeah, eventually in your career, you start to specialize. But you come out with a very, very broad-based but not super deep base of knowledge. Same thing with business school, right? You come out with an understanding, a little bit of operations, a little bit of finance, a little bit of accounting, a little bit of marketing. In master's or PhD programs, it's not like this butterfly, okay? It's a nail. It's very deep. It's thin, but it's very, very deep. So you might be doing a master's in art history, and you'll be focusing on the Baroque period. And you will know about fanciful paintings better than anybody else, but only people who like Baroque sort of art are going to understand what you're talking about, okay? And so these tend to be very, very deep programs. It's good if you want to go into academia, okay? If you want to go into academia, you pretty much need to have a PhD. You're going to want to follow this route, okay? If you want to be a researcher, you're going to want to follow this route. But you have to understand that it's very different from professional schools like medical school, business school, or law school, because what happens is you have very deep understanding of a very narrow area, and that limits your career to that very narrow area. It also limits your network to that very narrow area. Now, if you know exactly what you want to do, that'll be great, because you will know every neurobiologist PhD in the country, okay? Because there's not that many of them. The other thing is it can be a huge investment of time, anywhere from 2 years for a master's to 6, 7 years for a PhD. And some of these programs are the most competitive programs, okay? Getting into, for example, an organizational psychology program, some of them have a 2% acceptance rate. To give you a comparison, Harvard Law School has about a 10% acceptance rate. Okay, Stanford Business School has about an 8% acceptance rate. That's 4 or 5 times more. These are very competitive programs because they're super, super small. All right, so that's a little overview. Now let's talk about the application process. The general rule is the more time you give yourself, the better off you're going to be. So if you think you want to go straight through to law school from undergrad, you should be preparing throughout your junior year for this, okay? If you're a rising senior now, you may very well want to say to yourself, I'm going to take a year off. And it is totally fine to take a year off. I took 4 years off. That was a little too many. But it's totally fine to take a year off, okay? And you can, as soon as you apply in October, you can go do whatever you want to do. Okay, so if you want to go like travel through South America, you can go do that. If you want to go be a ski instructor in Colorado, you can go do that. Because once you apply, they really don't care what you're doing. Okay? But you need at least 6 months to do this process well, and that's at a minimum. Okay? So first you decide whether or not you want to apply, then you've got to do the test prep. Of all of the standardized exams, the 2 toughest for graduate school are the LSAT and the MCAT for medical school. Okay, the GMAT is much easier, the GRE is much easier. The GMAT and the GRE are sort of like the SAT on steroids. That's all they are. It's going to be like algebra, geometry, okay? It's going to be fill-in-the-blank grammar questions, okay? Reading comprehension. It is literally the SAT on steroids. But the LSAT and the MCAT are not. They are much, much, much more difficult. I studied 9 months for the LSAT, okay? People study 6 months for the LSAT. It is not at all uncommon, okay? And the LSAT score is the #1 factor in admission to law school. So you've got to leave enough time for the test preparation phase. Then you decide what schools you want to apply to. And then as you put together your application, okay, you want to make sure that you're really thoughtful about it. You don't want to just sort of write about the first idea that you have. We do this regardless of what type of school you're applying to. We take you through this 4-step process. First, you introspect. It's just a fancy name for brainstorming. Right? What's interesting and different about me from a personal or a professional or an academic background? And then you outline what's going to go in your personal statement, what's going to go in what's called your diversity statement. And even if you don't think you're diverse, everybody's diverse. Because they don't mean diversity by personal background or ethnicity. If they were just worried about personal background and ethnicity, there's a checkbox. They wouldn't need a statement about it. What they want to hear about is what is some unique perspective that you're going to bring into the classroom. Okay? So some of the best diversity statements I've ever read were written by people who on the face of it might not have looked very diverse, but they had a diverse experience that they had been through, okay? Then you got to prepare your recommenders. You shouldn't just hand the paper to the professor and be like, can you do this recommendation for me? Because then you're going to get a generic recommendation that's going to get you into a generic school. What you want to do is you want to give them a cover letter that reminds them of the classes you took with them, the papers you wrote for them, the grades that you got, so that it's very easy for them to actually write a personalized letter. Because at the end of the day, professors are going to give you, half an hour of their time to write this letter. And they can either print off the generic one, or if you make it real easy for them, they will add in what extracurricular activities that you were the president of PIKE, whatever. But if you don't make it easy for them, they're not going to do it because they're swamped with tons of these recommendations every fall. And then when you sit down to write, you want it to be like a conversation with the admissions committee, okay? Don't try to use, a 50-cent word when a 5-cent word would do. Everybody sees through that, okay? So just write in a way that's really authentic to you. Now, more and more law schools want interviews. A lot of them are over Skype. If you get Skype interviews, when we have Skype interviews, even if the person's down the street, we practice on Skype because it is very hard to interview on Skype. We'll talk about this a little bit when we get to careers as well, because a lot of careers interviews, when you're interviewing for jobs, are over Skype. And there's you have to worry about the lighting and everything, and hand gestures, and how close do you want the camera, or how far back do you want the camera, and what's in the background, and what are you wearing, okay? I've interviewed people over Skype for jobs with my company because we have people all across the country. We have counselors in LA that, I see once or twice a year. And you make judgments when you see what you see on Skype, okay? If you see something untoward in the background, it's not a good thing, okay? And then deciding where to apply, and then we have a law school boot camp. In law school, all that matters is the first year. You have to work hard for 9 months, that's it. Then you just have to pass, okay? Because the way that the job search works coming out of law school is that they are going to interview you at the beginning of your second year for jobs for your second summer. And 90% of lawyers get a job at the place where they work during their second summer. So where you work that second summer is crucial to the whole idea, okay? And so what we need to do is make sure that you're well prepared for first year, because the only grades they're going to have to evaluate you are those first-year grades, and that's why everybody competes so hard for them. Okay, now graduate school application process. These will vary from school to school between PhDs and master's programs, but it's still the same idea. You have to do the GRE, but you want to find out. If you're studying economics, all they care about for the GRE is the math. Don't even study the verbal. They do not care. Whereas if you're getting a master's or a PhD in English, they only care about the verbal. Do not worry about studying the math. Nobody cares. There are very, very few fields where they actually care about both. Psychology, political science. The only fields where they care about both are fields where you have to do statistical research, so they care about the math, and you have to do writing of papers, so they care about the verbal. Okay? But art history, only the verbal. English, only the verbal. Economics and all the sciences, only the math. Now, there are also subject tests in like chemistry and biology, similar to the subject tests you took when you were coming into undergrad. Okay, so the test preparation is sort of unique to each program. For school selection, it's not like business school or law school where you just go to the best school you can get into. You really have to find the best school for what you want to do, okay? So if you want to do organizational psychology, for example, Boston University has a great program. It may not be the #1 ranked university all across the country in terms of undergrad, like Harvard and Yale and all of that, but for organizational psychology, it has one of the best programs, okay? For clinical psychology, Miami has one of the best programs, okay? So you really need to choose schools based on who has the premier faculty members in the field you want to study, because those faculty members are going to be the people who recommend you for faculty jobs or for research positions. So you don't choose on some sort of overall ranking, you choose based on a very micro knowledge of, okay, in my tiny little field, where are the best faculty members? And then there's always interviews critical to the process. And it's about a 4-month process, sometimes a little longer. Now, what about if you're applying for a job straight out of school? Let's talk a little bit about that now. You should be thinking far, far ahead. So if you're coming up on senior year, you should already be thinking about what you want to do. Because there will be a lot of on-campus recruiting that will be starting. Okay? Some of you may have already done on-campus recruiting for a summer job. Hopefully that summer job goes well, and then you get offered a full-time position. Okay? But if you're going to be interviewing during senior year, there are fixed timelines for different jobs. So typically banks come first, then consulting firms. They come sort of late fall, early winter. And you have to stay up with your school on when are they going to be doing these different on-campus interviews, because it's a fixed process. You can't just like sort of send them a resume whenever you want. You have to play by the rules. Okay, so if you want to do consulting, or if you want to do investment banking, or you want to do private equity, any of the most common, you want to do marketing like at General Mills or something like that, P&G, you have to follow the procedures through your career services office. But a lot of you are going to say, I want a certain job and I'm going to sort of find my own way. Okay? Well, then what you need to do, okay, is plan a process to get you there. And the first thing is figuring out what is your career vision. Figure out where you want to be 20 years from now, not where you are right now, but where you want to be 20 years from now, and then back up from there. Okay? And I'm going to advise you on the next couple slides, use your PIKE network, okay, to do informational interviews, to find people who have the job you want to have 20 years from now, and go have coffee with them or lunch with them, and find out what they did to get into that job. And don't do it with just one person, because that person might have had a very idiosyncratic way of getting there. Do it with 5 people or 10 people if you can find that many, okay? And figure out what are the common denominators. If I want to become an entrepreneur, what did most people do to become an entrepreneur, okay? You'll probably find that a lot of them were general managers at some point, where they were not the owner of the company, but they were sort of overseeing everything, because it's great preparation for being an entrepreneur where you are responsible for everything. So you have to figure out where you're trying to go first, right? And where you want to be 20 years from now, and what job you need next in order to get there. If you're trying to get into business school, for example, the hot things to get into right now are startups. They love people from startups, and even if you go to a startup that fails, they love it. Technology, okay? More and more they're recruiting from Google and Facebook and Twitter. So if you love those things, go follow that passion, okay? If you want to do consulting, do consulting. If you want to do investment banking and work 100 hours a week, you can still do that. But don't feel like it used to be, and you have to sort of stay up on this. People who were, if your parents went to business school 20 years ago, they'll tell you go to Goldman Sachs, because it used to be that if you went to Goldman Sachs, you could go to Harvard Business School no matter what. Now, it's actually quite hard from Goldman Sachs to get to Harvard. It's much easier to get from Google to Harvard Business School, because times have changed, and the opinion of what is considered the most prestigious job has changed, okay? So first you've got to develop that career vision of like, where do I want to go with my life? And if you're not sure, then take a job like consulting, which will give you exposure to a lot of different things. That's what I did. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I did consulting first. Because the good thing about consulting is you spend anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months in one company doing work, and then you move to a different company. So I worked for an airline, I worked for a clothing manufacturer, I worked for a bank, and so you get exposed to different industries and different functions, and some of it is marketing, and some of it is cost cutting, and you get to see, where do I fit, what are my passions. Then you've got to develop effective resumes and cover letters, and we'll talk about that on one of the upcoming slides, okay? Little tip, no 2-page resumes, please, okay? I have 4 degrees, and I still managed to get it onto 1 page. You can too, okay? Many employers consider it the height of arrogance when somebody's like 22 or 23 years old and they feel like they have to have a 2 or 3 page resume. It looks really unprofessional, okay? So no matter what, 1-page resume. Then you've got to apply for positions, and apply for lots of positions, even for positions you're not sure you want, because that gives you leverage. Let's say you get the job you want, but they don't want to pay you what you think you need to be able to live in that city. If you have other offers, you might be able to get more money. As someone who employs a lot of people, I can tell you, if I really want a certain employee and I feel like I'm not getting them, I will offer more money if I really want them. So don't only apply for just the jobs you're sure you want, apply for any job you think you might possibly want, because the more options you have, the more cards you have to play in the future. Then you'll have interviews, and you should be doing informational interviews. Even if you're a freshman or a sophomore now, start doing informational interviews. Start building your network. Get on LinkedIn. Get to know people. Most people find jobs through somebody they know, okay? Not through career services, not through Monster, but through people that they know. So the more you build your network, the better off you're going to be. And then you negotiate offers. And don't be afraid to negotiate. Okay? If somebody offered you a job in today's job environment, they really want you. Okay? And they're probably a little more flexible than they're not going to offer their final offer as the first price. Now, sometimes it's, certain things like big corporations, like American Express, all starting people come in at the same amount, so there's no flexibility. But if you're working for a mid-sized company or a smaller company, I can guarantee you there's a little flexibility. And they don't want to go through the process of having to choose somebody else. It's really annoying to have to choose somebody. Once you've settled on someone, you really want that person to come on your company, and it's not worth it for you to fight over $5,000 a year. So if you really need that extra $5,000 a year to live the way you want to live, okay, to pay your rent, ask for it, okay? All right, so let's talk about resumes. First, keep it to one page, please, okay? You don't have to have your entire life history on there. Resumes should be about highlighting your biggest accomplishments and achievements. Okay, now, the second bullet is probably the most important bullet of the entire presentation. Okay, when you write a resume, whether it's for law school or business school, okay, whether it's for a job, whether it's for grad school, please, I implore you, use powerful verbs. Convey through your resume that you are a leader. Use words like led, spearheaded, initiated, conceived, implemented, increased. Okay? Don't use words like participated in, observed. Okay? Because they get when, we have 2 job openings at my company right now, and we get thousands of resumes. And we have a woman who goes through them all. And I can tell you, when we're looking for certain job characteristics, the verbs people use on the resume right away create an impression. It is a huge first impression. If somebody said they participated in this, and they participated in that, and they observed this, you're certainly not going to put that person in a position where they have to have any judgment or responsibility, right? Because clearly this person is a follower. They are not a leader. But if it's somebody who implemented a strategy, if it's someone who started a program, if it's someone who founded a chapter, then you're going to say, I can entrust this person with the project because this person is going to take that project and they are going to run with it. They are going to make it their own. They are accountable for their behavior. And that's what employers today want, and that's what they don't see enough from people who are millennials. So this is a great way for you to stand out from a lot of other people who have been sort of coddled their whole life, okay? You really need to show power in your resume. It will make you stand out, okay? Number 3, do not include your GPA if it's under a 3.5. Employers will probably ask, but there's no reason to shoot yourself in the foot. If you've got great leadership experience, but you've got a 3.0, don't put the 3.0 on the resume. Make them bring you in for an interview to find out that GPA. And then when you're in the interview and you're developing a great rapport with them, and they see that that 3.0 is not representative of your potential to contribute to their company, okay, then they don't worry about it. But if you put 3.0 or 3.1 or 3.2 on the resume, they're not going to call you for the interview. It gives them you don't want to give them any reason not to call you for an interview. When you're sending out resumes, your goal is not to get a job. Your goal is to get an interview. And then once you get the interview, then the goal is to get the job. And so if you give them any reason not to interview you, right, they won't interview you. Because people get thousands of resumes and they have to sift through them very, very quickly. Next. You don't have to put every work, this is not a background check, people, okay? You don't have to put every job you've ever had on the resume. If I am interviewing you to be an English tutor, I don't care if you were a server at Applebee's. I don't care if you were a lifeguard when you were 15. I only care about relevant experience. Okay? I'd rather hear about your leadership experience in PIKE and what you've done there and how you've changed things and how you've improved your chapter's life than hear about you being a lifeguard. It's just irrelevant to me. It's completely irrelevant. Okay? So you don't have to include everything. Next, this is also really, really, really important. Another thing that makes people stand out in their resumes is they quantify results. Increased membership in my chapter by 25% in 1 year. Okay? Wow. That person increased the membership by 25% in 1 year. What if he could increase our revenues by 25% in 1 year? This person delivers results, right? So anything that you can quantify. Do a survey of your brothers on the experience this year versus last year, and you can then say increased sort of satisfaction amongst our membership by 25%. Whatever it is, try to quantify it. Okay? If you got high honors on a thesis, put high honors on your thesis. That's quantifying it. Okay? If you wrote a 120-page thesis, put 120-page thesis. People like to be able to grab onto facts. They want to see powerful people who they can trust, okay, who will take charge, who will be leaders, okay, and they want to see that this is backed up by results. And that's what your resume needs to do. Okay. So how do you leverage your PIKE experience to appeal to either admissions committees or employers? So there are 3 different things that, employers or admissions committees are looking for. They may be looking for vital stats, and PIKE really doesn't come in here, right? This is what are your scores, what are your GPA. But if there are reasons that your scores are lower or that your GPA is lower, it is incumbent upon you to tell them. Don't think they're going to come and ask. Employers, admissions committees, they have a job to do. They don't have time to come ask questions, right? They just move on to the next resume. They just move on to the next application. So like if your mom was really sick with cancer and that's why you had a semester that dropped your GPA by 0.3, you need to proactively tell them that. Just add a little extra addendum to your application, okay? Or if you were sick, or if anything happened, if your family was having financial problems, anything that happened that caused either your test scores to drop or your grades to drop need to be explained. Your unique personal story, this is where you can use a lot of your PIKE experiences. Who are you personally? Who are you professionally? Who are you academically? What are some of your greatest accomplishments? Likely some of those will be with your fraternity. How about setbacks or disappointments? And how have you grown from them? Many schools will ask a question, and many interviewers will ask a question. Tell me about a time you overcame an obstacle. Because guess what? You're going to face obstacles in life. Okay? And it's not about being perfect. It's about being able to rebound from these obstacles, from these challenges. Okay? So how do you rebound from challenges? In fact, I was doing a reference for someone this week who used to work with us, and they asked me, it was a form I had to fill out, and they asked me to tell them about a time she didn't do something well and how she responded to it. Okay, and they wanted to see if she's open to feedback. Because people who are employers or admissions counselors, they want to see that you're open to feedback. And then you have to have a reason. Why does this field appeal to you? What do you want to achieve in this field? All right, so let's get down to brass tacks. Recognize that PIKE is one valuable component of your application, whether it's for a job, okay, or it is for a particular school. Given the large number of other applicants who also are leaders in Greek life, it cannot dominate your application. It should be a big part of your application. This is a big part of your time in college, right? You've spent a lot of time getting a lot of leadership training, building a fraternity of brothers, but it should not be the only thing. There have to be other things too. You have to show a little bit of variety. But it should be prominent, but not dominant on your applications or on your resume. Next, remember that they're going to be comparing you to a lot of other people who have Greek experience. So what you want to do is set yourself apart from other fraternity presidents or vice presidents or leaders. So what was your unique contribution? Did you found the colony? Okay, that's a unique contribution. Did you increase membership by 25%. That's your unique contribution. Did you negotiate with the administration to solve some problems? That's your unique contribution, right? So what did you do as a leader that really makes you stand out versus all these other people who happen to be president? Because president's only a title. You also have to show the impact. What did you do with that opportunity? And that's what they want to see here. Next, you want to emphasize the values that PIKE instills in you about being a leader and an athlete and a scholar and a gentleman. Okay, you want to emphasize those values in your either resume or application. And lastly, and I can't emphasize this enough, you're very, very fortunate because you have an extra alumni network that other people don't have. Right? Other people only have their high school alumni network. They only have their college alumni network. But you also have a PIKE alumni network, and you want to leverage that for informational interviews, to find out about different industries, to find out about different schools, what kind of grad school is right for you. It is a very, very huge resource and benefit and something that will carry forth with you the rest of your life. So in summary, it's going to take a lot of time. Don't minimize the amount of time it's going to take to get into a top school or to get a top job. First, be introspective. Figure out, where do you want to go? What do you want to do with your life? Brainstorm. What makes me unique? Then work to differentiate yourself from other people who are similar to you, right? So if there's going to be 3 candidates for this job and we were all presidents of our chapter of our fraternity, how am I going to differentiate myself? How am I going to win that battle? Why are they going to choose me? What results, what impact am I going to put down that makes me the winner in that competition? Remember that you need to customize your application for every job. You need to customize your application. We receive tons of applications for jobs where it's very clear that it's just a form cover letter. We don't even read them. Okay? And the same thing with law, business, or grad school. If it's clear that you just sent the same essay, doesn't even mention the name of the school in the essay, they're not even going to read it. You need to show that you know specific programs at that school, that you know specific professors at that school, specific courses, specific clubs at that school. If it is a company, do the research. It will pay off. You'll be the one who gets the interview, right? When somebody mentions something unique about our company in the first paragraph, right away our interest is piqued. They've been to our website already. They're not just applying for this job because it was, on Monster. They're applying for this job because they actually have some interest in doing this job. Enough interest that they actually found out something about us before they submitted a resume. And then I think it makes sense to depend on committed, seasoned experts. Okay? So in life, we all have to specialize eventually. Right? There's a reason I have a personal trainer. Okay? Because this isn't going to get any smaller unless I have a personal trainer. That is not my area of expertise. Okay? And I know that. And I admit that weakness. And I'm okay with that. Okay? So when you engage in a process that you're only going to do once or twice in your life, like you're only going to apply for your first job once in your life. You're only going to apply to law school once in your life. You're only going to apply to business school once in your life. You probably want people with you on your side, in your corner, who've done it many times before. Because if not, you're at a huge disadvantage, right? Because the schools do it thousands of times every year, okay? And so there's a repeat player advantage that the schools have, and to equalize the playing field, whether it's schools or jobs or whatever, you want somebody on your side, in your corner, who's been there many, many, many times before. And whether you work with us or somebody else, I just think it's a smart investment, okay? Because you want to make sure that you do everything to get your career or your academic future off on the right foot. So here are a couple of success stories of fraternity brothers that we worked with. So Matt was the VP of a national fraternity at NYU. He was also on the Interfraternity Council. He had a 3.4. He came to us with a 143. That is quite low on the LSAT. It's about the 30th percentile. He got it up to a 166. That's about the 87th percentile, and he is now at Columbia Law School. Brent co-founded a chapter, Colony, which is now a chapter of a national fraternity at Wake Forest. 2.7, started with a 156. He worked with us on both the LSAT and the GMAT, went up on both of those, and got into Wake Forest Law School and UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School, both top 25 schools. Paul, he was a leader. He was on the board for a number of years at Lehigh in a chapter of a national fraternity. He only had a 3.0, but we helped him get a number of different job offers from investment banks and consulting firms, even though he only had the 3.0, by leveraging his leadership experience. So in short, decide sooner rather than later if graduate school is right for you or if instead you'll be applying for jobs. You need to make that choice pretty soon, right? Because you go down two different roads then, and your preparation is different and your emphasis is different. Am I starting to network or am I starting to prepare for standardized tests? Two very different roads. Recognize the difficulty of getting into graduate school or landing a top job, okay? But don't use that as an excuse. All of you can get into a great grad program. All of you can get a great job, but you just have to put in the effort and believe in yourself. And you have to budget enough time. If you're gonna have to take standardized tests, make sure you get them done early. And then as I mentioned, I think it makes sense to work with experts who've been down this road many times before. We do free consultations. So a consultation is not I solve all the problems in your life in 30 minutes, okay? I wish I could solve all the problems in somebody's life in 30 minutes, but I am not capable of that. What a consultation is, you come to me and you say, I've got this goal, and I say, okay, tell me a little bit about why you want this goal and what you have so far, and then I lay out a plan as to how we could help you get to that goal. So if you want to do that, you can email us at consult@stratusprep, and you do receive 10% off of any services by using the discount code Pi Kappa Alpha on our website. Also, we are doing a drawing, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Joshua, raise your hand in the back. This is Joshua, okay, who is a Pike Brother alumni. So he'll be collecting all of the little entry tickets. If you didn't get one, there's extras by the projectors. Make sure you give us those because we're going to give away $1,500 worth of services, which could be 10 mock interviews. It could be an LSAT class. It could be a GMAT class. It could be helping you towards your law school application or business school application counseling. So make sure you enter those. Also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you have a relatively large chapter and you'd like us to come to campus, I do that. I do campus tours. We need you to guarantee that you can get about 50 people there because it doesn't cost you anything. I come for free. I don't ever charge to speak. And so basically, it can be a good benefit for your brothers, but you may have to partner with a sorority or with the pre-law and pre-business school because I got to be sure if I'm going to take the cost of coming that there's going to be people there to chat with. All right. So I think I've run short on time in terms of Q&A. Is that right? I can take a couple questions? Five questions? 5 minutes? Okay, so I can take 2 or 3 questions. Please. Okay, what was the undergraduate degree in? Okay, so the question was if you have a degree in engineering or science, an undergraduate degree in engineering or science, what are the chances of being able to get into law school to pursue patent law or intellectual property law? Very high, very good percentage. And your chances of getting a very good paying job afterwards, extremely high. So if you want to do patent work, okay, if you want to patent inventions, you have to have a science background. Okay, it's a requirement. And you have to take a special bar exam called the patent bar. And so law schools are always hungry, voraciously hungry, for engineers and scientists who want to combine an engineering and science background with a law degree. Because as technology dominates our lives, we need to patent more things, which means we need more patent lawyers. So if that's something you're interested in, it is a very potentially lucrative career.